I want to welcome you back to another episode of what I've branded Pivotal, since these interview style segments tackle impactful CPG industry topics and lessons from the business leaders that live it every day. If you're a OG consumer of my content, you might recognize this episode's guest. That's because he was also the guest on Pivotal episode number 1 way back in August of 2018. While repeating guests won't be commonplace, I felt like since a lot has changed in the last 4 years for both of us, I needed to kind of run it back with my longtime friend and CEO founder of IWON Organics, Mark Samuel. A few years ago, Mark committed to daily, kind of like off the cuff, value oriented LinkedIn posts. A small decision that has now snowballed into a powerful personal brand that pays countless dividends to IWON Organics. Mark also shares how his entrepreneurial journey hasn't always been filled with wins, but a never quit optimistic mindset has made him comfortable within the chaos. That carries us into talking shop about the current state of the CPG industry, the changing marketplace, margin pressures, and the impending recession. These are just some of the interesting areas that we chatted about in this episode. But without further delay, here is my recent conversation with the founder and CEO of IWON Organics, Mark Samuel. So after like 40 or so of these like interview segments, I decided to have my first repeat guest. And now I don't necessarily plan on doing this again for a while. So any of my other guests that want to have a rerun here or repeat, don't hit me up. I definitely, still have like a ton of, I guess, captivating guests that are on the list that are definitely want to be on the show. So I got to kind of prioritize them. But why Mark Samuel gets the repeat is because I pretty much did him dirty, I think, 4 years ago. If people maybe don't remember because you haven't been following me this long, but in 2018, Mark decided that he was going to be the first guest on these like interview segments. And at the time, I had no idea how to do audio, video. I probably still don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm a little bit better now. But because of all that, there was a ton of like problems or whatever. The content's up there. So if anybody does want to kind of check it out, I'll pop it up for you guys so you guys can watch that. But a lot has changed in these last kind of 4 years and everything. So I figured we needed to kind of run this back. So, Mark, welcome to the show and thanks for joining me again.
Glad to be here. It's going to be an exciting one off the back of that.
So, like I said, both of us, I think a lot of things have changed over the last 4 years. But I want to kind of focus first, at least initially, like on your personal brand aspect of your life, your journey, before we kind of get into the growth of IWON Organics. So, initially, I mean, I think most people that maybe know you, I think at times maybe you're getting the same kind of feeling that I get. Like people will know you from like things you posted on LinkedIn. Like if you're at a show or you're at something, they'll bring up something that you said, and you're like, "Wow, people are listening. People, this is resonating. This is going well." But I wanted to kind of, because I know 4 years ago, I don't think you either you were initially right at the beginning of that journey or you hadn't really started it yet. And now, I don't know, LinkedIn probably calls you an influencer now. And you have all this kind of like popularity on there. But I wanted to kind of ask you, like, have you seen a big difference, both like personally and professionally, from putting yourself like out there on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think I need to find out when the first time I did post, but I don't think it was when we initially spoke. And everybody should know I knew you even before that, but
Yeah.
I want to say it was maybe 2.5 years ago, but I need to verify that. There's definitely been impact from it. And I don't think of myself as really anything, you know that, because you know me sort of personally. I literally just stayed on the course of what I intended to do, which was just have one commitment, which was to write something each day. And then every once in a while, there's maybe two or three, because everything for me is off the cuff. So there's definitely been impact. There's definitely been results that have come from it, whether it's people knowing who I am, people knowing the brand because of that, me getting, sort of communication on the back end from people asking for certain things or giving us opportunities because they are aware of who I am because of it. So I think it's just snowballing. It still has a lot of room, in my opinion, has a lot of room to grow as far as what may come from it. So I'm just staying the course.
I think one of the things that you said is super important because I think a lot of people that are maybe starting, posting on LinkedIn, maybe they're, thinking of themselves as somebody that wants to maybe create some content or whatever. Is that I think you and I like we kind of post from the cuff and we kind of whatever's really like a hot button or something that's really burning in our head. Like that's usually what drives our content creation. It's not something where we have a ghostwriter or we have people that are like trying to create this like well-oiled machine. It's really just, hey, like this is who we are. This is what we post out there. And I think specifically for you, I mean, you've posted a lot of things that shows your personality. Shows how nice a person you are, how you are looking to help other people along the journey, and kind of letting people know, hey, this is how I've done it. This is the way that I approach it, right, wrong, whatever. This is the way that I kind of go about it. And I think that resonates with a lot of people because we talked about it before. We're not polished individuals. I don't think either one of us, think of ourselves as like this polished person. But I think that resonates a lot more than people that are trying to like have this really like refined personal brand because they believe that's the way to kind of attract attention or influence.
Yeah, yeah. There's like two pieces to that. Number one is transparency always wins, right? I think people want to know that they're listening to or hearing from or getting advice from somebody who's giving everything. And that's the good, the bad, and everything in between. So that is definitely something that's easier for me than probably most others. Um, I think it has to do with now going to the second point, which is every single post is off the cuff. I don't pre-write anything. And there's a lot of people in this what I'd consider sort of an influencer realm that talks on what people should do. I mean, there's even those that are putting out courses, and a lot of it is about pre-writing, putting content together for the week and the month. And I don't have anything wrong with that either. I think that's great if somebody sort of likes that discipline. I just know what works best for me. And it allows me, in my own opinion, it allows me to be even more creative because of it. And so I don't have to sort of overstimulate myself, right, with ideas and concepts and start almost stressing myself out because I need to put out some content. I just get up, we do our thing. We all have our routines in the morning, and then whatever comes to mind that I think is going to have some value to the community, I put that out there. And that's the last piece to it, which is it needs to be the cornerstone of the content. There needs to be a value piece to it, or at least a majority. Because as you said, some of my stuff has a little bit of my personality, so there might be a little ha-ha stuff there, and just to keep the flow going, I guess. And so that's sort of been my journey thus far.
And I think, kind of even you mentioned this, like, the good, the bad, the ugly. I think there's an aspect of, entrepreneurship that you have to be realistic about, which I think you do a really good job at it because you've been doing this for a long time. You've had a number of different startups, some more successful than others, but all of them have had their like, kind of trials and tribulations, and you haven't really hid behind a lot of that and said, hey, these are lessons I've learned. And I'm guessing that there's a lot of other entrepreneurs that are probably either have faced this or going to face this. And hey, this is the reality of that situation. Be that from different challenges within the build process, the selling process, even just the mental grind that comes with entrepreneurship. And I've always really appreciated your takes in that area because you've done it. I think that people need to kind of look at the people that have a ton of experience in that and take what they're saying, and kind of process that within a lot of like the Goldilocks things you see about entrepreneurship, which is very rare that that kind of stuff ever really happens. That's like cherry picking the greatest hits instead of actually being realistic about like what it takes from A to Z to get, things going in entrepreneurship.
Every one of us who's doing this in some capacity is going to find a community that resonates with them, right? Like there's younger cats. I don't know why this person's coming to mind first, like on Instagram. This guy Max, who you know, right?
Yes, Max Tuning. Yes.
He just came to mind actually because I don't even know why I follow him. I don't follow many people. Like it's just kind of in my feed and all that. It's the community. Like he's a younger cat. He's got this shtick about him. He's been doing it a long time. He was first, and so that's his community. And so where like what is he offering up? He's just offering up this journey, right? His own journey. And there's a lot of wins for his thing because he's built a really big community. Again, I'm just using this as an example because it's a really good one. That there's people who, his community is probably not the same as my community, right? Or the community that we're building on this other platform. And I just bring it up to go back to that main point, which is whatever you're putting out there is going to gravitate towards somebody or somebody's, right? And from there, you're going to build this thing out. So long as it hits on all those things we talked about, provides some value and resonates with people, and you're transparent and all those things, right? So I think that's one thing that people sort of lose focus on, or they don't understand about that aspect. It's like it's not for everybody. And that's when you realize that and you understand it and you're okay with it, it allows you just to be you. Just be you. Just do the things that feel comfortable for you, and you'll notice that then that's making sense for this person or that person, and that's really all I've done. So going back to my wins and losses, I just know that there's a certain community out there that wants to hear about those, and they definitely don't want to hear about a bunch of wins because that's not reality, right?
Yeah.
It may be for some. I don't know, and that person might have their own community too, of just people who want only positive all the time. I don't want to hear about anything negative. But for me, that's not reality. Getting beat up multiple times and going to war multiple times over these last 17 years, doing my own thing, is something that is helpful for others to hear, so that they know that they're not alone on their own journey or their would-be journey, a journey that they may go on. So that I just stick to those basics, and that's how I've been rolling with it.
Yeah, and I even think about something that I posted the other day about, the Inc. 5000 list came out, and that's always this big thing where people are, kind of celebrating their wins, and that's great. I love it. I love the growth, especially these last couple of years where it's like extremely difficult to operate in any industry during this time. So you should be happy that you've obviously achieved this huge thing. But on the flip side, the people that maybe applied and didn't make the list, or people that maybe just had no intention of applying or anything like that, or maybe even the ones that are just kind of just hanging on for dear life right now. A lot of it, I think, needs to be even kind of applauded as well during this time. Not to say like, hey, you should be entitled to these like, claps or whatever. It's that, hey, like the reality is this was super tough and you went through a lot of crap, and you're probably still going through a lot of crap, and you are just struggling, and there's a lot of other people that are just like you. Don't think everybody's just posting these huge growth rates in that's the reality. The reality is there's a lot of people that are just kind of hanging on right now. And if you're struggling with that, I mean, I think it's ask people, hopefully reach out to people, try to get into their mind, because even the ones that are winning now, at one point in their entrepreneurship journey, they were not winning, and they had those same feelings of doubt and struggle and everything like that. And it's important for us to kind of like complete that picture, because I think during those times, people will think, hey, the highlight reels of everybody else's lives is their lives. That's their whole life, instead of people thinking, hey, that's only one snippet of a bigger journey. And it's important not to really, I guess, kind of compare your step to their, other step, or, wherever it is, because that's just it's a bad cycle.
It's a great topic because it just happened, right? And I think this will resonate with those that saw it. I've noticed that there isn't a lot of wins out there, right? I don't know if most notice that, or there just isn't a lot to clap about. The ones that are doing it, you see it happening and you're clapping. It depends on how you're cut. There's always, if people are really honest with themselves, right? There's always this sort of me too, like I want that too thing, right? It's okay. Anybody's watching this and they're like, I think that's me. It's okay. That you have to understand how we're built, right? We're animals. We're emotional creatures. And it's okay, so long you're not like hating on somebody. You don't want somebody to lose, but if you didn't get that award, or you didn't get the accolade, or you didn't get that retail activation, and you see somebody else does, and it's okay to have these different feelings going on. Some of them are like, yeah, I really good job, and like, why can't it be me? It's okay. So like there's just life, right? A point on this sort of 5,000 thing. I take it in stride, as most should. If you wanted to, you could go open up those numbers and just tell yourself, or go look at your numbers. You would probably, this isn't for everybody, you'd probably make that list. I'll explain how this works. Is it kind of looks at it as a 3-year look back, versus where you are now, blah, 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 let's say a year prior, and like just do the math. If the person who's number 89 on the list and they had a 382% growth, like, did you have a 394? Well, you would have if you had put in the thing. I think you have to pay. I don't even know.
Yeah.
So it's okay, folks. It's okay. You're on that list too, probably. You get where I'm going with this, Josh. Anyway, the other thing is, I'm going to leave the last point is, and this is going to be I don't know where you're going to want to take this right now. There's not a lot of people winning today. I'm going to just stick in the CPG space, since you're in it. You have amazing value that you offer in this space. And because you used the word, I don't believe many of us, see, I'm using us, are winning today. I think it's a really, 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 I'm going to do it again, really tough business to be in right now. And the ones that are winning, like actually winning, I would think that those are the ones that are have the proper fundamentals as far as financially in place. That could be unpacked in multiple ways, but it doesn't matter. Had steady continued growth, had steady continued growth within the community that they're building. Those are 3 things right there. I'll leave it alone because we could go 10 layered, right? That many don't have. They just don't. And so we can unpack this during the episode, however you want or not. But I just want to leave it at that if you're in that group that's not really winning or feeling like you are, it's okay. There are many more of you than the latter. So.
Yeah, and I think it's, how do you define winning? Because I think you've picked apart a few of these, and I know that I do it as well, is that, there might be a top line revenue growth, especially we're talking CPG brands. People can kind of, walk down the line and try to see who we're talking about. But there are brands that are growing pretty decently, but yet it costs them a couple dollars to make a dollar. And that, to me, maybe this is because I'm old school, or maybe it's because, my upbringing or whatever. I appreciate profitability. I understand that goes in and out of like favor sometimes depending on how the market swings, but like I still have always kind of put a premium on, can you create profits? And sometimes within, the phase of your business, that's maybe not as possible, especially when we're talking CPG and sometimes certain categories within CPG. But when you've been in business for, say, 10 years or something like that, and you still haven't made a profit in the CPG industry, you should be like, I don't know if that's considered winning. And you talked about, like, the uniqueness maybe of the journey and how each specific person maybe, has this different path to get there. Specifically for your business at IWON, like we're talking about like playing the long game a lot of times. I mean, I think the way that you've built it is very, I want to say meticulous, but it has been kind of one by one, step by step, brick by brick type of a situation. If that's retail doors, is that, different partnerships, is that different hires? You still have a very lean team, even though you've been around for, more than a handful of years. Even investment rounds and everything like that. You've taken each one, in the proper amount of time to assess it, make it make sense for your business, and not over, I guess, indulge in a lot of those things. And I think that that's probably why, you might describe yourselves as winning or not, or, you're taking your hits or whatever it is right now. But at the end of the day, like, you've positioned yourself, at least foundationally, probably a much better than some of these ones that were over throttled on the growth side and now are looking at a different environment and saying, okay, now what do we do?
There's a lot of brands that aren't doing enough revenue, right? Even to get to that point of can I turn this into a profit model, right? We were lucky that we were sort of building the last 6 years, like sort of brick by brick in that realm of revenue. And it just so happens coincidentally, and I don't mind being really open on this sort of conversation here, that we're in this mode of, okay, let's showcase that we can profit. So it just so happens is right now. And August is the month, and we believe it's there, but that doesn't mean anything long term, right? That if we string it together and okay, we have the foundation to do it. And foundation to me is a baseline revenue that you're going to need. Because then you just equate your margin and then your G&A and stuff like that to say, okay, could we keep doing that? And then the second piece of that is, can we keep doing that and grow? Because what happens is, and what's happened in this space is, a lot of money is placed into sales and marketing, right? It's that burn that people talk about, that cash burn and everything else, and that's really what is resulting in this top line growth. Some way more than others, as we've seen and talked about, right? There's two parts to that. Again, most aren't in that position right now. You know, if they're doing 2 million, there's not enough there for you to really say, all right, we have this for G&A, we can operate. It just the math doesn't work. And then the second piece, which is the cornerstone of the business, and I've been talking a lot more about it, which is the margin. There's just not enough in this business. And it's off the back of a post I did yesterday. And I was like, I'm going to be throwing this out there. Let's see what people say. I am a firm believer you have to self-manufacture. And so then you would be saying, well, what does that mean for you guys? Are you looking at it? I'll just say this. I'm a firm believer that you need to self-manufacture. I am. They say, well, wow, Dave, where did you come to? Well, I'm 6 years into this thing, and I knew it a few years back, and I knew it now 2 years back, and I knew it now 1 year back, and I know now. Like, I am a firm believer that you need to own your own factory, and I don't say that easily, and I don't say it like just dreaming of things. I'm just saying some things off the back of that, which will help in context. It's a separate business. It's an extremely difficult business. It is a headache. It is not something you intended to do when you originally started. It is extremely capital intensive. Now move that to the side. You need to own your own factory to really make create an opportunity for yourself as a long-standing brand that has financial fundamentals.
I just saw, I think it was today or maybe recently, the guys at Midday Squares, I say guys and girls at Midday Squares, but Nick made a post specifically around, why they decided to self-manufacture. And, he kind of drew out all of, like you were saying, very complex, very capital intensive, just tons of different things. But there are very few people in this world that can do a great job at scale by manufacturing. And regardless if, the plant-based protein squares are the right winner, or the extruded protein snacks, or whatever is the winning SKU that takes this thing going, you still have the fundamentals of like this manufacturing that will never leave you, and that is extremely, like, I guess, valuable, powerful, like that can go with you forever. And because there's very few people that are great at it, very few people that are interested in doing that, because it's, like you said, it's tough. It's not something where you can, click on your mouse a few times, start up a Shopify site, and order a few $100s worth of stuff from a co-man and start selling. This is a much different process. But if you can figure it out and you could do it well, like you said, I mean, it puts you at such an advantage that a lot more people are going to be thinking about that, I think, now. And this is going to breed a different entrepreneur during this period that potentially might be a lot stronger, than the previous, I guess, phase of like, let's try to outsource as much possible and just, like you said, become a kind of a marketing company or sales and marketing company, and that's kind of it.
I call it low barrier of entry. The last however many years, it's like a gold rush in this industry. It was like the mortgage days back in the day, and actually the mortgage days even the last 5 years, right? Which, by the way, is going to have a massive fallout, right? You didn't to sell something like that. I have to use it just as a reference. To sell a 2.5% mortgage, right, is easy. You probably don't even need to I don't want to get deep on this. You could anybody could sell it, right? And then you're calling your buddies and you're like, I just made $3,000, and you're like it's for everybody. Okay. Now let's talk about CPG for a second. Low barrier of entry. And what I mean by that is you're in your mommy's kitchen and you're baking some cookies and you throw in some ingredient that you think is just amazing, right? You think it's your recipe. And you say to yourself, oh, these are really good. And then your buddy says they're good, and your mommy's friend says they're good. I don't know why I keep saying mommy. What's up, Ma? How are you? All of a sudden you package these things up, because that's easy too. You go down to your local Michael's, or we have one. I don't know if you have one of those. It's like these, you get the little cellophane thing.
Yep.
And now you're down at the farmer's market and you're selling them. If anything, that's the only time you profit. You made it for 2 and you sold it for 4, and all of a sudden you got a cash flowing business. Now, let me move that aside, but just to the point of low barrier of entry to get into the business. Now, to actually manufacture at scale, not just in the kitchen, like if you were to actually scale that business, it's a whole other thing. It really is, right? It's an entirely different business, and you need to have actual skill sets, like true skill sets, to understand what that's going to look like. Specifically on the financial piece, that's crossing every T. Because what happens in manufacturing is, and you know this, is you got to keep the line moving. So even if you just got a 1,000 square foot warehouse to start and you had one line, for it to make sense financially, you got to keep the thing moving. So that's a whole other thing also to unpack. But I just think if you're going into the business as a whole, self-manufacturing, along with your brand that you're going to market and build, you need to have a few more things in the back pocket as far as abilities, right? So that's my take on that.
I want to talk a little bit more about margin. I think if you were to, go to a grocery store or something like that, and you kind of look at, current prices, and you look at, maybe you have any understanding of the cost side of some of the inputs and what's going on with some of the inflation, and just, what it costs to actually make things at this point, you start to build in some of those other kind of costs, like trade marketing, or, different kind of promotional things at the grocery store to try to entice people and all this. And you go, okay, there's not much left here. And you kind of mentioned this before, but what I want to kind of throw this over to is that because we're dealing with all that inflation, and now we're dealing with a recession, not a recession, what are we calling this, whatever, if it's a downturn or not, a lot of these small and emerging brands, or I would say anybody that's, probably less than $100 million, and that's a lot of the CPG industry, especially food and beverage, I think is at maybe a disadvantage, be it the time in market or the complexity of their business is not at the point where they understand how to make maybe moves as quick as possible based around maybe like price increases, and then what's the elasticity of demand and all these different things. Like if you are Kraft, or you're Mondelez, or you are Coca-Cola, or anything like that, you have teams of analysts and teams of people that either can crunch different patterns based on your hundreds of years in business, or 2, you have the ability to kind of look at all that kind of stuff on the fly with a bunch of the data, big data, and say, okay, we've made a right correction, we've made the right moves, we've done these things, and you can kind of take advantage sometimes of some of this chaos. But if you are a smaller emerging brand, you're scared sometimes to raise a price 50 cents or $1 to the consumer, because that you're hurting just like them, and you're like, I don't know, I need to do this, but I'm also a business owner, and I'm also a consumer, and I don't feel bad, and whatever. And by that time you decide to make that decision, it's probably
you lost out on a ton of your net margin opportunities to kind of like blend out some different things because you weren't able to make the decision. I don't know, like if you've felt like you've come across some of those situations or not, or you've kind of been able to make strong moves or not, but do you have any advice, I guess, of this whole kind of situation for from more of the emerging smaller brand aspect? And I say smaller brand just with like under $100 million probably.
Margin is the entire business. It's the entire business. And I'll use the example. We had to price up because it was passed on to us, and it didn't work. Our customers did not like that at all. And it put us in a little bit of a bad situation for some time. We're even correcting it now. We are already at premium. We were already the highest price item per ounce in our category. When you take it to another number, right, it can really disrupt your business. And we found that out. Many people actually found that out and I think are really trying to rewind things. But it's hard to rewind something that is a requirement to operate the business. That's the problem. And even a buyer would say, which they were getting, you can imagine all the paperwork that was happening, right? There was a period they were getting price ups all over the place. And you can imagine that they at first want to ask you the general question, why is there a price increase? Oh, it's because of this input, that input, and then it's just more fair game, right? Yeah. But for you to then retract later and say, all right, we got to scan down to this number. They're going, well, what happened to that price up? Oh, I'm going to have to eat it on my margin. That's not good. And that's a really big theme that I believe is going on now, has been going on for some time, and will continue to go on. And that is why there's going to be a lot of issues coming. Not just have already started, but just the fallout has already occurred. There's businesses you don't even know about that have gone out of business, number one. Two, that have just rolled up into something else and just taken their losses. You just wouldn't even know. Or three, are working on it, right? They're working on what are my options right now. There's a lot of that happening. And it's because of the one word that you originally started this with, which is margin. There's not enough of it. And I'll say, as if you were a smaller brand and getting into this business and working with a co-man, which is what we have to do, right? You're not self-manufacturing yet, or you couldn't figure it out, you can't capitalize it, you don't know the business, all those things, the reasons why you can't. You're using another business. We call them co-mans or co-manufacturers, and sometimes you call them your manufacturer. It's yours. No, it's not. Yeah. And the pricing's all over the place. And to go further, and I try to make this or allude to this point in all fairness, they're a business too. And so I never get really sensitive, even stuff that I've had to deal with. And I get people to write all these horror stories, right? There's going to be bad people in business all the time, just bad seeds. That happens in any business, right? And then there's going to be ones that you encounter that have to do with maybe a co-man or co-manufacturer or your manufacturer and the like, right? Where you might have some set pricing and think all is well, and you might even think you're friends. I've heard people use that. Become friends with them. Okay. Well, then all of a sudden there's a price up of 10%. I'm just only going to use a clear number, 10%. The 10% was your margin. It was what you needed to operate the business. The number doesn't even sound that big. It is. It's gigantic. It could be 5% to me. It's gigantic. But 10%. And what they're doing is they're running their business. And they're running their business with, I don't want to sound mean or anything like this, but there's no care for you. I'm sorry. They're just running their business. And so I just think people need to keep that in mind when we're talking about this. It's a really important topic, and just to be prepared. And then the question would be, well, I'll go somewhere else, or can I go somewhere else? And it's a very tough thing to do. And specifically right now, as my last comment to it, to sort of wrap it in a bow, there's some businesses, as far as verticals in our space, even just extruders and the like, that are even more difficult to come by. What do you think happens when there's a theme of capacity is tight? What do you think happens? Well, you know what happens. So it's to go back. I think that's. Hope I laid out a few things there.
No, I think it's a lot of really great points because I think that it's the reality of the situation. It's what people necessarily don't hear a lot of, but when they start to get into it, because as you said, I mean, when they first have that rosy image of starting their CPG brand, it's kind of what you said. I mean, maybe they stumbled on a product they love, or hey, I have a combination of things that I think I can make into something cool or whatever, and you start your business and you create this cool name and you hire your first people, all this kind of fun stuff, and then all of a sudden the reality of the situation is like something happens where you have to change co-mans and there's only 3 of them in the country that have the ability to do your product, and each one of them are over capacity and they don't have anything going on, and then what does that mean? And then you're out of stock and then you're out of business, because with CPG, if you're not in stock, somebody will switch to somebody else. It doesn't matter how much they love you. I don't know how much they love your brand. If you don't have an option for you, they're going to go to one of the other dozens of substitutes that are close enough that they can get by. And by the time you come back, you might have lost that customer because they tried something else and they tried something else better. But just kind of looking at, maybe the reality of this, recessionary period is kind of going on, and you still being, an optimist or a realist that is, somebody that it looks on the bright side. How do you prepare for, having a successful year or maybe 2 in the face of, extremely challenging business landscape?
You have to continue to try to put irons in the fire. So I'm dealing with so many battles right now, but every day we still try to put irons in the fire. There has to be some wins that you're prepping up in order to keep the business moving. The minute you go idle, we call it like putting points on the board, right? You got to keep taking shots, right? The minute you stop doing that and you're continuously playing defense, you're done. The business is done. Hand it over. And I hate to sound so sort of matter of fact, but that's just how it works. And that's why there's all the cliches of just keep going and all those things. That's where they sort of kind of stem from. It really is that. Well, that's really what the intent is. Like, just keep going. Like, keep going. Keep putting up points on the board. You'll know when you can't keep going. That's where I say that's where it becomes a cliche. And the person who said it never was in your shoes. They're just that person that is in that corner and they don't really fundamentally understand what you're dealing with. Again, I'll say that again, and it's okay. You'll know when there is no more keep going. What you do is you take the concept of keep going in that you move on to something else. It's a really important thing people can take from this. It's okay to fail. It's just what's going to catapult you to doing something else. So that's where keep going comes from. So I'd say in the face of it, it just comes back to what I originally said, which is you got to keep putting points up. And just a case in point would be for us, we have innovation. Like we had planned something and we still are planning to launch it in the next couple months. It's a new product. It's not like a new flavor. It's like a new product. And admittingly, it's risky. But so is all this, right? And so you got to keep this thing moving forward. And lastly, I always say you never know what is going to be that lightning.
Yeah.
And it could be this thing, right? It could be some unique flavor innovation, and you go and show it to Whole Foods as an exclusive, and they're like, "I love this." Like you got to keep putting the shots up, right? The shot. I don't know what this is. It's look at that. It ain't Steph Curry. So go Dub Nation. So anyway, you get what I mean by that. It's you just got to keep putting some shots up in the face of defense that you're also playing.
Yeah, I even think about it like, okay, so obviously the macroeconomic things are going to happen. That's, if you think about this, you could do basketball. I think like even like, that's the piano. It's there. This is what you could play. But the person that's playing, they can still make beautiful music from that specific piano, even if it's out of tune, even if it's they can find a way to do that. Sometimes the person needs to, I want to say put your blinders on, but really like understand that you control a lot more than you think within your business, your life, or whatever. That just because there's a recession, just because there's, whatever, people could say a new president, this, that, or it doesn't matter really. I mean, it does, but you can't affect a lot of that. You can't necessarily, really change the piano. You have to just think, how can I take what I do best and make music out of this? And I think that that's like a lot of times when people are getting so worked up about, what's going to happen next and is there a recession and what's that mean? Yeah, you should be aware of all that stuff. I think it's important for any entrepreneur to be aware of what's happening in the world, but don't let that derail what you have in place because there's a lot of growth. I mean, it's not like the world's going down to zero. People are going to still spend money. They're going to spend money on these categories. They might spend a little bit less than they did previous years, but that doesn't mean you can't get a bigger share of it by playing the game right or whatever. So I think it's just a matter of like making sure that you realize that it's important, but not as important as probably a lot of people put it out there to be.
You have to be semi crazy to do all this, right? And I mean that in the best of ways, right? You have this thing, most of us, and that's how you know if you're cut to do this. You have this thing that oftentimes you can sleep at night. Some of you, I never sleep, and I'm so well. Then that's not good, right? Like there's this calmness that you're able to give yourself in the face of death. There's somebody who's watching this will understand the sentiment when I say this. You have to be somewhat crazy to be able to have all of these things weighing on you. I could be out of business tomorrow. There's a dispute over here. This isn't working. We can't sell it in. We just got a no from Safeway. Somebody's upset that we have to talk about their pay. Just the face of agony, death at your door. Yet you somehow get up in the morning, put your gym clothes on, attack a workout, and prepare for another day's battle with optimism. So I'm going to say that, you get how I frame that? With optimism. How the heck is that even possible? Well, again, it goes back to it. I really think you have something wired in you, us, whatever, that is different than most.
I love that point. I think we're just going to end on that point because I feel like that's exactly the point that needs to be ended on because I feel like it went full circle with everything. So, Mark, I appreciate you giving me time again.
I hope you enjoyed this YouTube video. If you did, consider hitting the like button to support me. Also, help me get to my short-term goal of 2,000 subscribers by hitting the subscribe button. I'd love to see you join me on this journey, but we need to fix the fact that slightly less than 70% of you that are watching this YouTube video right now are not subscribed to my channel, and that makes me extremely sad. But I do want to thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.